Hey, travelers. Tonight we're stepping into a humid slice of 18th century paradise where the ocean never stops sighing. The palms whisper ancient gossip, and every fashion choice seems suspiciously like a prank played by history. Welcome to Samoa, a place of astonishing natural beauty, extraordinary cultural tradition, and, well, some fashion statements you probably wouldn't survive with your dignity intact. Tonight, you'll be strapping coconuts to your chest, wrapping your body in bark cloth that disintegrates if you breathe too hard, and attempting to strut while your accessories attempt to escape. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you've ever worn something you immediately regretted, drop your city and your current local time in the comments, because someone out there is listening to this in full pajamas at 2:11 a.m., and I respect that vibe deeply. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the sun, dew still fresh on the pandanus, leaves your body barely stirring under the mosquito net, woven so tightly, even the breeze had trouble getting in. But that's not what wakes you. What wakes you is the knowledge that today, for reasons both ceremonial and shameful, you will need to wear coconuts. Not drink from them, not cook with them. Wear them. You step out into the morning air and feel it immediately, the warmth thick as syrup, and the unmistakable scent of smoke from the cookhouse fire mingling with crushed hibiscus. But today, there is no breakfast fire waiting for you. Instead, there is your aunt holding two halved coconut shells, like she's about to perform either a ritual or a crime. You approach slowly. She does not smile. She simply nods and gestures. You know what to do. The coconut shells are not soft. They are not comfortable. They are not symmetrical. They are, however, fastened to a bark fiber string that's been braided tight enough to hold a canoe together, and she ties it behind your back, with all the empathy of someone lacing a war drum. The shells dig in. They chafe. They creak with every breath. They do not, you realize, even match. This is kizi, a traditional form of upper body covering that, according to more generous oral traditions, served as both modesty and adornment. But this version, the coconut shell variant, is for ceremony. Or as your cousin once whispered while escaping a chieftain's daughter's naming right fashion punishment. Historians generally describe these coconut shell coverings in polite terms: protective, symbolic, gender-specific. But those same scholars have never had to jog across uneven sand while wearing concave fruit casings lashed to their ribs with twine made from tree bark and disappointment. You walk forward stiffly. There's a light wind, which would be pleasant if it weren't also funneling directly into the awkward air vents created by your botanical bra. And then just when you think it can't get worse, a toddler points at you and says, "Your coconuts are upside down." You pause. Are they? You don't know. You don't ask. You keep walking. As the morning ceremony begins, drums chants the rhythmic stomping of feet. You try to blend in. Everyone else seems fine. Their coconut shells are aligned. Their bark cloth is crisp. Even their headbands aren't crooked. And yet here you are, desperately trying not to breathe too deeply, for fear of snapping your chest harness in half, like a poorly planned piñata. Fringe anthropologists love these moments. They speculate that early Samoan adornment was less about utility and more about visual hierarchy. In other words, it wasn't about how well something worked. It was about how striking it looked from a distance, like a fashion version of a conch shell horn. You weren't dressing for comfort. You were dressing for memory. And yes, sometimes the memory was that time you sneezed and your coconut covering flipped entirely backwards. Still, you stand proud. Because everyone else is just as dressed in symbolism, even if their symbols don't squeak when they move. One elder wears a necklace of shark teeth that makes him look like he lost a fight with a fishing net. A young woman nearby adjusts her waistband of tightly braided pandanus that somehow makes walking look like both a statement and a negotiation. A group of dancers wears feathers strapped to their calves, their shins vibrating like ceremonial maracas every time they take a step. And you have coconuts. The ceremony continues. You bow, you clap, you hum along, and slowly somehow you begin to forget the ridiculousness of it. Not entirely. You're still aware that your attire could double as a fruit bowl. But you also feel something else. Belonging. Participation. History. Wrapped around your chest, tied in fiber. Awkward, but real. You are uncomfortable, yes, but you are part of something. As the sun rises higher, the ceremony ends. You're sweating now. The twine digs deeper. The shells have left small imprints on your skin. Two perfect ovals, half sanded, like tan lines shaped by satire. But you don't untie them, not yet. You walk home slowly, each step less about fashion and more about having survived something ancestral. Mainstream fashion might scoff at this, but you know better. Sometimes the most embarrassing outfits are also the most meaningful. And sometimes they're just coconuts tied to your chest. Either way, you wore them. There's a sound bark cloth makes when it betrays you. It's not a rip, not exactly. It's more like a sudden gasp, like the breath of a leaf trying to hold itself together. You hear that sound now, and it's coming from your waist. You freeze. You look down. The edge of your ai toga, the finely pounded, lovingly dyed strip of bark cloth tied around your hips, has split ever so slightly along a seam you forgot was already worn thin. You're not in public, yet. But the risk is no longer theoretical. This is the nature of bark cloth. Made from the inner bark of the paper mulberry tree, scraped, soaked, beaten, and sun-dried, it is the most common textile of 18th century Samoa. It is also in the wrong weather and the wrong context, one of the most temperamental. It can be thick and durable or thin and whispery, and you never really know which you've wrapped yourself in until it's too late. This morning you were in a rush. You reached for what looked like a decent piece. And now here you are, standing half-wrapped in anxiety and slightly flammable fiber. You try to adjust it without anyone noticing. You fold it over, tug the edge back around, retie the knot at your side, tighter this time, though you're well aware that tighter isn't always safer. You mutter a short apology to the ancestor, whose handiwork is being stretched to its limit by your overambition. You walk more carefully, now one hand subtly bracing your hip, like a sash-wearing pageant contestant who suspects her outfit may combust. Mainstream historians praise bark cloth for its ingenuity, its ecological elegance, and its cultural value. And yes, it deserves all of that. But what they rarely describe is how a piece of it, once wet, transforms from an elegant drape into something closely resembling a cold slap from nature. You once got caught in the rain wearing a ceremonial wrap. It turned translucent. Your dignity did not recover until the following moon cycle. Fringe scholars sometimes romanticize bark cloth failures as social theater moments of vulnerability that created bonds within the group. But no one's bonding with you today. You've just arrived at the meeting house, and you're about to kneel on a woven mat. Now let's talk about kneeling in bark cloth. There's a very specific way to do it gracefully, slowly, with a measured descent that makes it seem like you are settling into history itself. You don't drop. You glide. You keep your back straight. You tuck your knees under. You keep the cloth draped carefully. You pretend it isn't fraying behind your thighs. Today your landing is adequate. No new tears. But you hear that whisper of resistance again, the sound of fibers beginning to argue with gravity. You clasp your hands, bow your head respectfully, and spend the next hour in ceremonial silence, thinking about whether your exit will require assistance. The speaker drones on about lineage and land rights. You nod. You are listening. But mostly you are imagining a world in which bark cloth could be reinforced with literally anything. Palm leaves, banana fibers. Just something that doesn't disintegrate when you shift your weight. You consider double wrapping tomorrow. Then remember the last time you tried that and nearly fainted from lack of airflow. The meeting ends. You stand. The bark cloth holds, barely. Outside, the sun is higher, and so are the stakes. Because now you're headed to the communal gathering where food will be served, and you will be seated directly across from a matriarch with eyesight sharp enough to spot a loose thread at 10 paces. You arrive, you sit, carefully, again. You make it through the meal. You pass the breadfruit. You sip coconut water. You decline second servings with a polite hand gesture because you're afraid that chewing too enthusiastically might cause some kind of structural failure at the hip seam. And then comes the moment. The laughter. Someone tells a joke, something about 2 pigs and a fish hook, and you laugh. You do. Because it's genuinely funny. But that movement, that brief, full-bodied chuckle, is all it takes. The bark cloth splits just an inch more. You feel it. You don't move. You sit like a statue until people begin to rise. Then you stand slowly, wrap your hands casually at your sides, and shuffle home like someone whose fashion choices have just betrayed them in the most intimate way possible. Historians still argue whether 18th century Samoan bark cloth was more functional or symbolic, whether it was designed for movement or for message. You now understand that it was both and neither, and completely untrustworthy in high humidity. Back at home, you untie the wrap carefully, fold it with something approaching forgiveness, and place it on the drying rack in the sun. It flutters slightly in the breeze, looking innocent. You glare at it. It does not apologize. Tomorrow you'll pick a different piece. Maybe one that hasn't been through so many ceremonies. Maybe one with stronger seams. Or maybe you'll wear a backup wrap beneath it. Just in case history decides to laugh again. And for now, you sit. You breathe. You feel the indent where the string pressed into your side. And you remind yourself that some garments are remembered not for how they looked, but for how narrowly they avoided becoming public scandal. You think you're prepared for the armpit feathers. You've dressed yourself with care this time. Bark cloth secured with extra tucks, coconut oil on your legs for shine, and a quiet sense of optimism that for once nothing will slip, snap at you. But then your uncle walks in holding 2 long feathers, dark curved, and still faintly twitching, and you realize the universe has new plans. Under the arms, he says. You blink, you hesitate, you wish you hadn't skipped breakfast. But it's too late. The feathers are yours now, and you must wear them. Decorative feathering in 18th century Samoa was not reserved for headwear or ceremonial cloaks. No. Sometimes the feathers went to the most impractical places imaginable, including your armpits. These weren't just ornaments. They were status symbols, signals, personal flair, and possibly deeply uncomfortable pranks handed down through generations with a straight face. You lift your arms. He tucks one feather beneath each pit, securing them with thin cords looped around your torso, tying them snugly just under your chest. The sensation is strange, ticklish but threatening, like being hugged by birds that do not love you. The feathers brush your skin with every breath, and you've already sneezed once before even leaving the house. Mainstream historians will tell you the Samoan use of feathers in clothing was rich with symbolism, markers of clan honor, virility. But they tend to gloss over the more pedestrian truth that sometimes a feather in the armpit was just a way to say, "Look at me. I'm not sweating. I'm winning." You step out into the sun. The village is alive today, full of movement and noise. There's a dance about to begin, and you're part of it. You try to act normal. You try not to think about the feathers. You try not to notice that the cords are already itching. The dance circle forms. You take your place. Your arms raise with the group, and the feathers immediately flop outward like startled wings. Someone snickers behind you. You tell yourself it was admiration. You tell yourself that twice. The music starts. Drums first, deep and steady. Then the rhythm of clapping and footwork begins. You sway, you pivot, you lift your arms. The feathers flare, bob and sway along. They are not synchronized. They are not helpful. They are extremely present. You can feel the sweat starting to gather beneath the cord. The feathers absorb none of it. They just stick. One catches a breeze and whips upward, dramatically smacking you in the ear mid-spin. You keep dancing. Fringe anthropologists sometimes argue that these types of adornments served not just as symbols, but also as distractions, diversionary tactics, in performance designed to make the audience focus on the flamboyance rather than any minor misstep in movement. You're starting to think that might be true. No one's watching your feet. They're watching the bird fragments now clumped under your arms like sleepy wings refusing to molt. Halfway through the dance, the inevitable happens. The left feather starts to slide. The cord loosens. You feel it shifting downward like a slow betrayal. You try to tighten your arm to hold it, but it's too late. With one bounce too many, the feather launches upward, outward, and then directly into the footpath of the chief's elderly aunt. She steps on it. She pauses. She looks at you. You freeze. She picks it up, inspects it, and hands it back without a word. You nod, gravely, as if this was part of the plan. Historians still argue whether armpit feathers were reserved for specific age groups or ceremonial ranks. Some claim they were worn only by unmarried young people during specific rites of passage. Others believe they were purely decorative fashion, for fashion's sake. You suspect the truth is somewhere in between. They looked good from a distance, and no one who wore them ever felt quite as composed as they appeared. The dance ends. You bow. The feathers stay in place this time, but they're slightly wilted. You return home with one stuck to your ribs, where it has become permanently fused with your skin by the gluey power of heat and regret. You untie the cords. You peel away the feathers. You hang them to dry. One is bent, now refusing to stand straight. It looks like how you feel. You promise yourself next time you'll wear arm bangles instead. Or nothing. Nothing sounds good. But later that evening, your little cousin comes by, holding a new set of feathers, and looking far too excited. They said you wore them well. You sigh. You accept them, because sometimes history doesn't care whether you're comfortable. It just wants to see if you'll keep dancing. There are waistbands that flatter. There are waistbands that support. And then there are waistbands made of woven pandanus. Wide, scratchy, aggressive little belts that grip your torso like a jealous cousin and don't let go until you either pass out or beg someone with a knife to intervene. Today, you are wearing the third kind. It looks beautiful, to be fair. From a distance, the strands gleam slightly bleached by sun, and time folded with careful intention and fastened around your waist with a series of elaborate knots that may or may not qualify as architectural marvels. But beauty, as you quickly realize, is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, because as you exhale, the waistband tightens. You shift your weight. It tightens more. You blink. Something pinches. Something else itches. And suddenly your entire midsection feels like it's been cradled by the world's most vengeful basket. This particular style of Cecia ceremonial girdle of twisted pandanus leaves was often worn during formal gatherings, dances, and presentations of status. It was meant to highlight your form show off your familial pride and remind everyone that, yes, you cared enough to suffer visibly for the sake of tradition. That's exactly what you're doing now. You try walking. That's mistake number one. Each step sends the waistband shifting ever so slightly, which would be fine if it didn't have the texture of braided sandpaper. The edge digs into your hip. The knot at your back feels suddenly sharp. You try to adjust. Your fingers fumble. You tug a bit too hard. That's mistake number two. The knot tightens permanently. You are now slightly hunched, slightly wheezing, and aware that at least one onlooker is watching you, with a mixture of amusement and concern. You wave, you smile, you attempt dignity. Mainstream historians admire these waistbands for their intricate craftsmanship. Some examples preserved in museum collections are praised for their precision, tight braiding, symmetrical weaving, fine detail. But what no catalog tells you is that these things were made for standing, not moving, not sitting, not breathing, just standing proudly, stiffly, and preferably for no longer than 15 minutes. You make your way toward the gathering circle. The event today is a formal recitation of lineage, one of those occasions where everyone is technically welcome, but no one under 30 really knows what's being said. You sit, or rather you attempt to sit. The waistband bends, but not willingly. It resists folding like a piece of origami that was never meant to move in 3 dimensions. You shift to one side. The edge of the pandanus digs into your ribs. You shift the other way. The knot presses directly into your spine. You consider lying down. But there is no graceful way to lie down in front of a chief while wearing a woven corset made of tropical shrubbery. You stay seated. You smile. You sweat. Fringe researchers have suggested that these garments served a dual purpose, not only for adornment, but for posture correction. There's some truth to that. You can't slouch in this thing if you tried. Your back is straight. Your stomach is tucked. Your breathing is shallow, but consistent. You are, for all practical purposes, a beautifully packaged leaf burrito. And then comes the moment everyone dreads the call to dance. You are not the focus of the dance. You're part of the group. But still you must rise. You must move. You must sway. The waistband is understandably opposed to this. You stand with the others. The first drum beat hits. You sway, or attempt to. The waistband squeaks. Yes, squeaks. The braided fibers dried, but not entirely dead, rubbed together audibly, like 2 angry palm fronds in a storm. You try again. The squeak becomes a creak. You imagine a forest spirit sighing in disappointment. The rhythm continues. You shift your feet, find your pace, let the movement flow upward, only to discover that the waistband now has a mind of its own. It's riding higher. It's rotating slightly to the left. It's cutting off circulation in places you don't want to name. Historians still argue whether the pandanus waistband was originally designed for movement or simply adapted into it over time. Some suggest it was ceremonial armor meant to signal control, discipline, restraint. If that's true, then you are currently a one-person metaphor for restraint, pushed to its breaking point. The dance ends, you bow. You retreat to the edge of the crowd where your friend, merciful, quiet, and carrying a knife, offers to help. You nod. She crouches. She saws gently at the knot. The waistband loosens with a dramatic sigh of fibers. You inhale for the first time in an hour. Your lungs expand. You see stars. You thank her. You fold the waistband neatly. You place it back in the storage basket. You don't hate it. Not exactly. But next time, maybe just a sash. Or better yet, a reason to stay home. The moment you unstop the jar, you know this was a mistake. The smell hits you like a challenge, sharp, sweet, and unmistakably fishy. It's the scent of coconut oil that's been stored too long in the sun and mixed with tree resin and a dash of fermented something. This, you remind yourself, is what you're supposed to rub into your hair. All of it, generously. You dip your fingers in. The oil is thick, nearly waxy, and warm from the morning heat. It clings to your skin like honey that's gone slightly sour. You start with your scalp, massaging it in circles, trying not to gag. Then you work downward, pulling the oil through your hair, strand by strand, until it gleams like wet rope. By the time you reach the ends, your hands are slick, and your shoulders smell like a fruit basket that lost a fight with the sea. This is what beauty means today. In 18th century, Samoa hair was no casual affair. It was status. It was style. It was the difference between looking like someone's third cousin, twice ignored, and looking like you might be worth marrying off to a family with pigs. The shinier your hair, the better. Oiled to high heaven, brushed until it obeyed, sometimes arranged in towering waves or pulled into tight buns that sat like smug little knots of social ambition. You've gone for the middle route today, a high knot in the back, twisted tight, and pinned with a sliver of polished bone. It looks impressive. It smells aggressive. Historians marvel at the complexity of these grooming rituals. They note the hours spent preparing hair before feasts and ceremonies, the types of oils and combs, even the early use of sea sponges for washing. What they don't mention is how often your hair became a literal fire hazard. You step outside, feeling the oil begin to cook slightly in the sun. Your head warms instantly. The breeze, instead of cooling you, seems to distribute the smell more broadly, like your scalp has started marketing its own perfume. A nearby toddler sniffs the air and says, "Smells like old mango." You nod. You keep walking. Your destination today is the chief's compound, where a gathering has been called to settle a land dispute or maybe to show off someone's new canoe. Either way, you're expected to look your best, which means the hair had to happen. But as you approach the central mat, you notice the fire pit has already been lit and people are beginning to gather around it. You take a seat. Cautiously. Your hair is now part oil lamp, part fashion statement. You lean slightly back, trying to keep distance from the fire, but the heat follows you like gossip. And then someone fans the flames. You feel it instantly. Your scalp warms further. A single curl near your temple begins to sizzle faintly. You press it down. You consider moving away, but protocol demands you sit where you've been placed between an elderly aunt who smells faintly of nutmeg and a teenager who keeps glancing at your head with growing alarm. Fringe scholars once proposed that the combination of tree resin and oil used in Samoan hair care, acted as a natural bug repellent. You silently hope that's true because if one fly lands on your head right now, you're fairly certain it'll get stuck and become part of your aesthetic forever. The conversation continues. You nod politely. You avoid sudden movements. The fire pops. A breeze lifts. Your hair swings slightly and takes someone's attention with it. Eventually, the council breaks. You rise carefully, neck stiff, and retreat behind the nearest pandanus screen. You untie the knot slowly, letting the heavy, fragrant mass of your hair fall in one sticky, shimmering wave. It swings with momentum. It does not separate. You rinse it, sort of. Using rainwater from the nearest catchment, you cup handfuls over your head, scrubbing gently, hoping to reduce the risk of spontaneous combustion later in the day. The oil doesn't budge. It only redistributes. You now smell like roasted coconut and mild despair. Still, you twist your hair back up, tie it tight. It gleams. It holds. Someone passes and nods at you approvingly. Very shiny, they say. You nod, you smile. Because in the end, that's what this whole thing is about, looking like you belong in the photograph, even if no one invented photographs yet. Looking like tradition poured itself over your head and stayed. Looking like history shaped your scalp into something sacred. Even if your pillow will smell like this for days. Even if a single spark could still ruin everything. You walk home slowly, head high, hair blazing quietly under the late sun. Tomorrow you might skip the oil, but not tonight. Tonight you shimmer. You always think earrings will be the easy part. You see them glinting from a woven mat at market tusks, polished to a smooth shine, beads strung like promises, shells that still smell faintly of tide. They look so manageable, so decorative, so gentle. And yet here you are, your earlobes stretched into full compliance, and you're starting to wonder if these accessories have plans of their own. Today's choice is bold, a pair of pig tusks looped through with strands of red-dyed coconut fiber and fastened with an elegance that belies their weight. They sway as you move. They clack softly with each step. And they pull. Hard. Your earlobes are not so much holding them up as they are surrendering under protest. You catch your reflection in a bowl of still water. Your face looks composed, regal even. But your ears are slowly making their descent toward your collarbones, and your posture is now that of someone trying to look interested while gently panicking. You turn your head. The earrings swing dramatically, nearly slapping your jaw. You try smiling. The movement shifts the weight. You feel the left earring tug again. You stop smiling. Mainstream historians admire Samoan ear adornment for its symbolism. They point to how different materials represented different social roles. Feathers for youth tusks, for power shell, for ceremonial purity. But few ever note the sheer gravity of it all. These weren't light accessories. They were declarations you carried with your cartilage. You head toward the gathering place where storytelling is about to begin. Today's tale is being told by an elder with a voice like river stones and a memory so sharp she once corrected a song verse that hadn't been sung in 30 years. You seat yourself among the listeners, head-high earrings jangling like ceremonial wind chimes. The story begins. It's a tale of gods, fishermen, and a jealous eel. You listen absorbed. You lean forward. Big mistake. The right earring swings again, harder this time, and smacks your shoulder. You try to pretend this is normal. No one reacts. You shift your weight. The left tusk grazes your neck like a disapproving hand. Fringe scholars speculate that some ear ornaments were deliberately oversized not only to show wealth, but to train the wearer's posture. Slouching, after all, becomes painful when your earrings threatens to introduce your ears to your collarbone. You consider this theory as you straighten your spine and tilt your chin upward, like you've just remembered you're descended from warriors. The wind picks up. The earrings lift. For a brief moment, you are free, suspended between gravity and narrative, your lobes fluttering with hope. Then the breeze dies, and they settle once more, tugging down, like the slow nod of resignation. You endure the rest of the story. You nod. You hum in agreement. You manage to clap without sending your earrings into a full spin. As the final verse is sung, you rise carefully, as if balancing 2 cups of very ceremonial soup on either side of your skull. Back at home, you remove them, gently, slowly. The fibers leave faint lines in your skin. Your lobes pulse slightly. You check them in the water again, still intact, if now slightly longer than before. You massage them with a bit of oil, not for shine, for mercy. Historians still debate the extent to which earring style denoted familial connection. Some believe certain shapes were reserved for particular lineages passed down, like surnames made of bone. Others argue it was more fluid, based on occasion and mood. You're inclined to agree with the latter, because today your mood was ambitious but increasingly sorry. Still, you clean the earrings, you wrap them carefully in cloth, you place them back in their matte-lined box, because tomorrow you might wear the lighter ones, the shells maybe, or just the tiny beads made from bird bones, something that won't make your ears feel like a public negotiation between aesthetics and physics. You lie down, your ears throb in rhythm with your heartbeat, but they did their job. They told the story even if it pulled. You didn't plan to wear leaflets today. In fact, you'd hoped this particular trend had blown off the cultural tree and landed somewhere deep in the compost heap of bad ideas. But no, someone had to mention a minor ritual happening at the outer village boundary, which somehow turned into a formal procession, which inevitably involved decorative gestures. And here you are, elbows draped in bundles of law-wet, glossy leaves, carefully bound into limp bouquets, and lashed to your upper arms like nature's answer to shoulder pads. The first problem is that the leaves are cold. They were soaked in river water just an hour ago to keep them fresh, and now they cling to your skin like soggy promises. The second problem is that they don't stay still. Every time you move your arms, they shift, slap, or slide slightly lower, creating a slow-mo version of a slinky descending a staircase made of flesh. You attempt a respectful bow. The leaves rustle like someone crumpling a love letter in defeat. Historically, these elbow leaflets, sometimes called laufala or laui, were meant to denote connection to the land, to show harmony with nature, and to, let's be honest, add a bit of pizzazz to the neutral tones of bark cloth. But they were rarely about comfort. They were ceremonial, symbolic, and when worn by high-status dancers, intended to draw the eye to arm movement. You, however, are not dancing. You are standing in a line, trying not to sneeze, while a cluster of ferns slowly migrates down your arm and into your armpit. The leaves are tied with strips of hibiscus bark, which are strong but fibrous, meaning they itch. Not immediately, no. They wait. They lull you into a false sense of leafy calm. Then as the midday heat sets in, they begin to bite, gently at first, then with more conviction. Fringe scholars once wrote about the sensory experience of ceremonial wear in Polynesia, the way adornments were not merely visual, but tactile, audible, even olfactory. That's certainly true now. Your arms smell like wet lawn, your ears are full of leaf rustle, and your skin feels like it's being slowly exfoliated by 10,000 tiny whispers. You walk with the group toward the boundary stone where prayers are to be recited and gifts laid in coconut bowls. Everyone looks solemn, peaceful. You try to match the mood, but the leaves have bunched under your elbow again, and you're pretty sure one is now wedged behind your ear. You dare not adjust it. Not in front of the elders, not while the priest is chanting. And then, of course, it rains. Not a dramatic downpour, just a slow, steady drizzle. Enough to rehydrate the leaves into a slimier version of themselves. Enough to make them stick even more. The bundles grow heavy. One slips halfway down your forearm and hangs there like a dripping green bracelet of shame. Another begins to peel upward in defiance, curling like a scroll, unrolling your social downfall. Historians still argue whether leaf adornments like these were worn daily, in certain contexts, or only reserved for high ceremonies. Some suggest they doubled as signals of environmental intention clothing that was designed to decay, to return to the land. You're beginning to think that's not symbolic. It's logistical. These leaves are dying right now. On your arms, actively. The ceremony concludes. You bow again, a motion that feels increasingly like a negotiation with gravity. The leaflets flap. One drops entirely, plopping to the ground with a wet slap. You pretend it's part of the ritual. No one corrects you. You return home like a wilted tree, bits of forest trailing behind you. You untie the bundles, slowly, carefully. The bark ties stick. The leaves fall in clumps, some still clinging to your skin with remarkable loyalty. You brush them away. You don't thank them. You hang the leftover greenery over the railing more out of habit than reverence. The rain continues. The leaves look at home, out there finally. Tomorrow you'll skip the leaflets. Maybe just wear beads, or bare arms, or stay inside and let someone else become a mobile botanical exhibit. For now, you sit with a cup of tea. You scratch your elbow. You smell faintly of compost, and you survived another tradition. The first thing you notice about the skirt is how it sounds. Not how it looks, though that's a whole thing, but the way it crackles. Every step, every breath, every slight bend of the knee sends a chorus of sharp rustling into the air, like someone trying to sneak through a pile of dry banana leaves wearing a guilty conscience. You shift your weight. The skirt responds with what can only be described as a crisp scolding. This is your aim, a ceremonial skirt woven from the dried leaves of a climbing pandanus vine. It's beautifully made. Each strip has been cut, soaked, dried, and hand-woven into a lattice of golden brown texture that fans out just past your knees, like the stiff hem of a sunburnt palm. It's tradition, it's artistry, it's loud. You take a cautious step forward. Crackle. You try to turn gracefully. Crackle. Someone behind you coughs, and for a moment you're not sure if they're amused or just choking on the sound of your outfit shedding dignity with every movement. Mainstream historians adore this kind of skirt. They write poetic descriptions of its structure, the craftsmanship, the labor. They talk about how these skirts were worn during major rites of passage, especially by women, during coming-of-age rituals, by ceremonial dancers, and sometimes even by chiefs, during certain festivals. But what they don't say, what they probably don't know, is that when the humidity spikes, this skirt becomes a wearable noise machine. You're headed toward the center of the village now. The midday sun is blazing. The skirt is stiff, already warming up like a thatched roof baking in slow motion. With every footfall, the leaves shift and scrape against each other, creating a sound so constant, you've started thinking of it as a backing track to your life. Crunch, swish, snap. You are a one-person percussion section with no off switch. Then you sneeze. That's when it happens. The waistband, a simple twist of bark cloth reinforced with knots, jerks upward. The sudden motion causes the entire back panel of the skirt to ripple dramatically, producing a noise so sharp, so brittle, so completely leafy, that a small child nearby drops their coconut bowl in surprise. Fringe scholars have a field day with this kind of thing. Some say the sound of the skirt was intentional, a form of presence, an acoustic announcement that you were coming, that your footsteps were ceremonial, that your body was not just adorned, but audible. You try to believe that. You try very hard. But it's difficult to embrace spiritual symbolism when your skirt makes you sound like you're carrying a sack of potato chips down a gravel path. You slow your pace. You shift your steps to a sort of gliding shuffle. This helps a little until you try to sit. You crouch carefully onto a woven mat beside the others. The skirt bends, but it doesn't go quietly. The lower panels creak, then fold awkwardly inward, poking your thighs like judgmental bookmarks. You adjust. The skirt adjusts back. You are now in a silent standoff with a pile of dried leaves. The discussion begins something about harvest schedules, trade routes, someone's pig wandering into a forbidden grove. You try to stay focused, but every time you lean forward or shift your knee, the skirt emits a papery crackle that draws glances. You smile, shrug, whisper, "Sorry." Someone nods sympathetically. Another person smirks. You begin to wonder if they made you wear this skirt on purpose. Historians still argue whether certain skirts were crafted differently for different events, whether flexibility or stiffness was favored depending on the ceremony. You're starting to suspect they just grabbed whatever looked the least flammable and hoped for the best. The meeting ends. You stand. The skirt springs back into shape like a badly folded tent. You walk home more carefully this time, using your hips to guide the sway, attempting to find a frequency that rustles less. It kind of works. The crackle softens to a murmur. You reach your house. You untie the waistband. The skirt drops to the floor with the heavy sigh of 30 leaves that never asked for this either. You shake it out, hang it to air, and vow to oil the strips before the next wearing. Though you know oil just makes the sound squishier, not quieter. Still, you survived. You walked. You crouched. You even sneezed. The skirt spoke volumes. And now the village knows you're very much alive. Because how could they not? You echoed. At first they seemed like a great idea, stylish, durable, traditionally respected. You admired them on others, elders pacing with dignity, dancers spinning with grace, warriors standing firm as turtles on stone. But that was before you actually strapped them to your own feet. Now after 5 steps and 1 stubbed toe, you realize the truth turtle shell sandals are not your friends. They are in fact your oldest enemies, masquerading as footwear. You begin the day optimistically. The sandals are beautiful, carved from segments of turtle shell, polished to a glinting sheen, their surfaces catching the light like wet obsidian. They're bound to your feet with woven plant fiber, braided tightly over the arch and around the ankle. At rest, they look noble. In motion, they sound like percussion instruments, with a grudge. Your first step is cautious. The shells clack against the packed earth. A solid, crisp sound, not unpleasant, encouraging even. Second step, louder. Third step, your heel slips ever so slightly, and the right sandal pivots with a mind of its own, causing your entire leg to do a small, involuntary, interpretive dance. You recover, you straighten, you tell yourself it was dignified. It was not. Mainstream historians praise these turtle shell sandals for their symbolism. Worn in sacred contexts and formal occasions, they were said to represent groundedness, wisdom, and a certain stoic poise. The poise part, you now suspect, was enforced by necessity. No one wearing these dares to walk casually. You move like a sculpture being pushed on a wheeled platform, slowly, deliberately, and with absolutely no sudden turns. You're headed toward a coastal clearing where a ceremonial greeting for arriving guests is underway. It's not far. A 10-minute walk, usually. But the sandals have other ideas. Each step is a negotiation between friction and noise. They don't quite flex, they shift. Slightly. Constantly. You adjust your gait. Smaller steps, less swing, more shuffle. Halfway there, the straps begin to chafe. Not badly, but enough that your ankles start composing complaints you'll have to address later with cold water and regret. You pause beneath a tree, lifting one foot for inspection. The sole of the sandal has already collected a smattering of pebbles, leaves, and the shame of your earlier stumble. You try to brush it clean. The sandal resists. Fringe scholars occasionally note that certain wearers lined their turtle shell sandals with woven padding, likely dried moss or cloth to avoid slippage and increase comfort. You wonder who those lucky people were and what mistakes in your life led to your current padless predicament. You continue walking. The greeting ceremony has already begun. A line of villagers kneels beside flower-draped mats, presenting gifts of fruit cloth and polished stone. You approach with care. The sandals, sensing the gravity of the moment, emit 2 loud clicks as you bow, just loud enough to be heard over the greeting chant. You flinch, you bow lower. The left shell scrapes against the mat, making a noise like a sea creature being dragged against coral. You sit. Slowly. The sandals resist. They refuse to fold with you. You end up in a sort of crouch legs, angled awkwardly, the shells pressed flat but unyielding. You look around. No one reacts. They've all worn these before. They know. The ceremony continues. The sun creeps higher. You shift to ease pressure on your arches. The sandal creaks. Someone glances your way. You freeze. A fly lands on your forehead. You do not move. Eventually, the guests depart. You rise, dignity intact, if slightly crumpled. Your feet throb. The shells clack as you walk back, louder now, like applause from 2 fans who are not particularly impressed. Historians still debate whether turtle shell sandals were primarily ceremonial, or if they saw daily use among higher status individuals. Some say they were inherited objects passed down through families, polished and relaced as needed. Others argue they were made fresh each season, tailored to fit specific rituals. You don't care. All you know is that yours will be shelved indefinitely after today. Back home, you sit on the stoop, unlace the bindings, and lift each sandal from your feet with the reverence of someone removing handcuffs. Your toes are marked with faint red lines. You press them gently. They press back. You rinse the sandals and place them in a shaded corner. They glisten smugly. You consider tossing them in the ocean. You do not. Because someday, some absurd distant day, you might wear them again, but not tomorrow. Tomorrow you walk barefoot, even if it rains. You run your hand across your jawline. The hair is there, finally. Sparse in places, yes. But it's growing. And today, you're going to honor it, celebrate it, make it terrifying in the most respectable way possible. Today you're dyeing your beard, not because it looks better, because it means something. In 18th century Samoa, a beard wasn't just facial hair, it was a flag, a declaration, a signal to your community that you had reached a particular stage in life. It meant readiness, sometimes for leadership, sometimes for ceremony, sometimes for hand-to-hand combat, or a marriage discussion. And yes, occasionally, it meant you were about to dance so furiously that even your jawline got involved. You crouched beside the fire pit, mixing the dye. Crushed berries, deep reddish purple, slightly fermented, and charcoal powder scraped carefully from yesterday's fire. The consistency is thick muddy and has the faint sourness of overripe fruit. You dip your fingers in. It stains immediately. You smell like a forest's last warning. You smear it across your chin, then up the sides of your face, tracing the baby hairs with the solemnity of a priest marking territory. It's not even. It's not pretty. But it is vivid. You wipe your hands on a cloth that will never recover. You glance at your reflection in the still water bowl. The beard looks fuller, darker, possibly edible. You nod. It's ready. Mainstream historians often refer to these beard dyes as cosmetic or ritualistic, part of a broader performance of masculinity and maturity. But they rarely describe the texture, the feeling of twigs and seeds stuck near your jaw, the slight sting from fermented juice dripping too close to your lips, the sound it makes when it dries, a faint crackle like a leaf that's still deciding whether to fall. Fringe scholars naturally love this stuff. Some argue that beard dyeing was an act of theatrical defiance. Others see it as spiritual camouflage, something that blurred the line between the man and the myth. You suspect it's a bit of both. But right now, you just hope it doesn't flake off mid-conversation. You're attending a regional gathering today, something between a family reunion and a political summit. People will talk. Eyes will wander. And if you're lucky, your beard will announce itself before you need to speak. You arrive fashionably early, which means everyone is already seated. You spot 3 other dyed beards, one deep black with glossy shine, one blue-tinted from crushed flowers, and one that looks suspiciously like it was painted on with ash. You nod to them. A silent brotherhood of stained chins. Then comes the challenge, not combat, not a debate, a dance. Spontaneous but inevitable. The drumming starts low, feet start tapping, someone whistles, a circle forms, and you're nudged forward, not because you're the best dancer, but because your beard looks like it's ready to declare independence. You step in. The rhythm hits. You sway, you stomp, your arms slice the air, and your beard, your very beard, bounces. It becomes a character, a statement, a conversation starter and ender. Every turn of your head sends the berry dye glinting in the light. Every gust of wind fans the scent across the crowd. You are now at least 30% performance art, and then it happens. Mid-spin, a bead of dye breaks free and lands squarely on the foot of a chieftain's niece. She looks down, then up. You freeze. She laughs. You are safe. Historians still debate whether beard dye was used daily or just for special events. Some say it was applied fresh for every ritual. Others claim certain blends were meant to last days, even weeks, slowly fading into a noble decay. You look at the smudges on your fingertips and decide you're in no rush to wash it off. You return home at dusk. Your face itches slightly. The dye is crusted now, stiff enough to hear when you yawn. You wash carefully just the parts that need it. Most of the color stays. You glance again at your reflection. The beard remains, flawed, patchy, bold. You survived the dance. You survived the drop. And best of all, you looked like someone ready for something. You wipe your jaw, fold the cloth, and let the night cool your face. Tomorrow it might flake. Tomorrow it might fade. But tonight it tells your story for you. You sit cross-legged by the fire fingers, still stained from yesterday's beard dye session, and now you're staring at what might be the single least helpful object in your wardrobe. A hat made entirely of leaves. Not stiff, structured leaves, no, this is a floppy, frond-filled creation that seems designed less to shield your head and more to confuse it. The thing sags, it droops, it rustles like a gossiping fern. But it's traditional, and worse, it's expected. You pick it up. It flops in your hands like a stunned sea creature. Made from young coconut palm and fala fronds, the hat is woven loosely, so air flows through it, allegedly. You've never once felt cool in this thing. The idea is that the leaves breathe, but all they seem to do is settle against your skull like a wet cloth and call it fashion. You position it gently on your head. It immediately slides forward over your brow. You push it back. It slides to the left. You tip your chin, adjust the leaf tie under your jaw, and manage to stabilize it just long enough to step outside. It's a bright day. Clear skies, no clouds, and enough sun to toast your shoulders. In 5 minutes, flat. You feel the first bead of sweat crawl down your spine as you walk. The hat is already heating up. It smells faintly of chlorophyll and effort. Mainstream historians describe these leaf hats as functional protection from sun markers of occasion, often personalized by family or clan style. But what they don't mention is the performance art involved in keeping them on. One gust of wind, one head tilt too sharp, and this leafy halo becomes a frisbee with delusions of grandeur. You're heading toward the outer edge of the village for a fishing blessing, a small, somber gathering where everyone is expected to look appropriately rustic and devout. The hat is part of that. Natural, someone had said. Traditional. You suspect it's also a mild punishment for skipping a canoe launch last week. You walk carefully. The hat quivers. It's balanced now like a fruit bowl on a wobbling tray. A child waves at you. You nod. The hat shifts again. You reach up to steady it, pretending it's part of your pose. At the gathering site, a circle is forming. Elders sit beneath the larger pandanus trees. Younger members kneel with offerings, bundles of fish baskets of taro small carved bowls of coconut milk. You try to take your place discreetly, but the hat has other plans. As you kneel, the tie under your chin snags slightly, pulling the front brim down over your eyes. You are now blind devout and vaguely leaf-shaped. You push it back. It resettles askew. Someone snickers behind you. You ignore it. The priest begins to speak. You bow your head. The hat obeys gravity with a soft rustle and kisses your nose. You try to remain serene. You peek out from under it. The ground looks dusty. Your patience feels thinner than bark cloth in a storm. Fringe scholars suggest that these hats may have held symbolic weight beyond sun protection, perhaps a nod to humility, to becoming one with the earth, to carrying the village's growth on your literal crown. You try to believe that as a beetle skitters out from the hat's brim and takes a leisurely stroll across your temple, you do not flinch. You are the forest now. The ceremony ends. The fish are blessed. You rise, smoothing your garment and adjusting your now thoroughly wilted hat. A cousin walks over. Stylish, she says with a grin. You look like a salad that found religion. You say nothing. You take off the hat. And now it's worse. Your hair is smashed flat. There's a faint green tint to your forehead. Your scalp feels slightly sticky from the leaf oils. You sigh. You carry the hat in your hand for the walk home. Historians still debate whether leaf hats were everyday wear or event-specific. The consensus seems to be both, which means they were worn often looked striking and behaved badly whenever the wind got ideas. Back at home, you rinse your face and dab your head with a cloth. The imprint of the hat's rim is faintly visible like a crown of thorns, but made of kale. You hang the hat over a beam. It droops immediately. You stare at it. It rustles. You walk away. You're not planning to be the center of attention today. You've wrapped your Ia Lava Lava, simply chosen your quietest beads, and even skipped the scented neck oil that usually leaves you smelling like overripe guava. But some cruel perfumed soul reminds you as you pass the communal hearth, don't forget your wrists. You pause, you sigh, you nod, because in 18th century Samoa bare wrists weren't just forgetful. They were incomplete, so now you're standing in front of the woven mat where the wrist oils are laid out, half glass bottles, half coconut shells, all glistening with sunlight and overconfidence. The fragrances vary. Some are sharp with crushed herbs. Others are floral, tinged with frangipani or ginger blossom. But your aunt hands you one you recognize instantly. Tamanu oil blended with Molivao wild citrus. It smells fresh. It smells like effort. It also attracts every mosquito in a 3-village radius. You pour a bit into your palms. It's cool, slick, and slightly green. You rub it gently into your wrists, then up your forearms. The scent unfurls instantly, wrapping you in a cloud that's equal parts invitation and regret. A passing dog pauses, sniffs, then sneezes dramatically and trots away. You're glowing now, literally. Your arms glisten like polished canoes. Historians love this part. They describe the scented oils as a marker of refinement, of hospitality, of attention to detail. In formal gatherings, someone's wrists could greet the room before their voice did. It wasn't just about smelling nice. It was about signaling cleanliness, care, and, if we're being honest, a little bit of one-upmanship. Fringe scholars go deeper. Some suggest the blend of wrist oils reflected not only status, but mood. That tamanu meant groundedness. That molivao meant clarity. That ginger blossom meant flirtation. Or that coconut with ash meant grief. You're not sure about all that. But you do know this. Your arms now smell like a fruit basket that got into a bar fight with a hedge. The event today is a quiet one, a weaving circle. You enter the fail where others are already seated, hands busy looping coconut fibers, weaving mats, binding reed fans. You take your spot. You begin to weave. And that's when you notice the problem. Your hands are slippery. The oil has not absorbed. The fiber slides between your fingers like wet kelp on polished stone. You try to hold it tighter. The strand pops free. You frown. You try again. Your palm glistens. The fiber flees. Your weaving begins to resemble a bird's nest built during an earthquake. Someone glances over, smiles. Strong oil, they ask gently. You nod. You attempt to twist the strand again. It loops twice, then slips free, landing in your lap like a dead snake. You keep smiling. The scent rises again, fresh, sharp, citrusy. One small child scoots closer and says, "You smell like the forest after a storm." You take that as a compliment. Mostly. By mid-morning, you've managed to complete half a fan. It's not symmetrical. It looks like it's holding its breath. But it's done. Your fingers, however, are now stained greenish-yellow and slightly sticky. The oil has turned from blessing to burden. Historians still argue whether these wrist oils were originally utilitarian or ceremonial, whether their roots were medicinal, spiritual, or purely aesthetic. Likely it was all three. Protection from insects, a tribute to the gods, a way to keep yourself from smelling like the fish you cleaned an hour ago. The weaving session ends. Your fan is accepted politely. You bow rise and leave. Outside a breeze picks up. Your arms cool instantly. The oil catches the wind and carries its scent down the path before you. You don't hate it. You just wish it hadn't turned your fingers into failed vines. Back home, you rinse your hands in warm water with crushed hibiscus bark. The oil clings. The scent softens. You dry your arms and they shine faintly in the fading light. Tomorrow you'll still use the oil. Maybe just less. Or maybe wear gloves. Or maybe let your wrists be plain for once. But probably not. Because here a scent is never just a scent. It's a statement. Even if that statement is I smell fantastic, but please don't hand me anything fragile. You wake to the soft clatter of bracelets. Not yours yet, but the sound of someone moving through the house too early, already adorned. You peek, one eye open. It's your cousin adjusting her ankle cuffs in the light of dawn, looking like a ceremonial wind chime, given legs. You roll over hoping to escape the fate of jingling limbs. No such luck. We're wearing them today, she says, not as a suggestion, but a sentence. You sigh. You rise. You dress. And then comes the part you've been dreading, the armbands. They sit innocently enough in the woven basket bands of finely coiled laufala and hibiscus fiber, dyed dark red and tightened over time into something resembling rope with delusions of grandeur. You slip one over your left hand. It stops halfway up your forearm. You twist, push, wiggle. It budges slightly. And then, nothing. You try the right arm, same fate. They're too snug. You finally press both on one at a time while biting your lip and mentally apologizing to your circulation. Once they're in place, your biceps look regal, defined, decorated, also mildly numb. Mainstream historians admire these woven armbands as indicators of readiness, poise, or clan identity. They note how the designs varied between regions, some simple, some intricately knotted with beads, shells, even small teeth from fish or birds. But what they don't detail is what it feels like to wear them in real time. Like your arms are in a friendly chokehold, you flex, mistake. The bands tighten, reminding you that your limbs are now ornamental. You move your shoulders. The cords squeak faintly against your skin like dry vines, protesting responsibility. You exhale slowly, carefully. The bands pinch. You're headed to the clearing near the river where a small procession is being held. The plan is to walk gracefully, maybe perform a few gestures of welcome, and definitely not lose feeling in your hands before the first chant finishes. You reach the path and begin the slow descent toward the water. Every movement is deliberate, not just for elegance, but for survival. Your arms swing ever so slightly with each step. The bands tug back, keeping you within their stern parameters. You feel like a marionette controlled by vines and familial expectation. As you near the river, the wind picks up. Your tunic flutters. Your hair moves. Your arms do not. You raise one slowly to adjust your leaf comb. The band presses into your skin with a warning creak. You drop your hand. The comb stays crooked. Your dignity leans with it. Fringe scholars theorize that these armbands may have originated as ritual restraints, symbols of self-discipline, physical containment, readiness to serve. You wonder if that's just a fancy way of describing looks great hurts slightly. The ceremony begins. You kneel beside a mat, arms folded neatly in your lap. The bands press. Not sharply, just enough to remind you they're still in charge. You start to lose sensation in your right pinky. You ignore it. The priest begins to sing. You try to clap in rhythm when appropriate. A gentle palm-to-palm motion. The bands squeak. One shifts upward, catching a few tiny arm hairs in its edge. You smile, anyway. You hum, you blink. Your forearms feel like they've been wrapped in sun-dried snakes. Eventually, the chants end. Offerings are made. Everyone rises. You do too. Carefully. You try to shake your arms gently, hoping to restore blood flow. You slap a mosquito from your elbow and regret it instantly. The slap reverberates through the band, like a tuning fork made of regret. Historians still debate whether these armbands were removed between ceremonies or worn throughout the day. Some sources suggest people left them on as long as they could bear it as a kind of wearable meditation on patience. You decide that those people were either heroes or liars. Back home, you peel off the bands slowly. Your skin bears their imprint, raised red, lined with tiny ridges, like someone etched a quiet map into your forearms. You rub your muscles, massage the indents. Your fingers tingle. You flex. You feel relief. You rinse the bands, lay them flat to dry, and hang them on their ceremonial peg. Tomorrow you might wear them again. But tonight you cradle your arms like weary birds and let them rest. They earned it. The mirror is just a bowl of still water today. No frame, no glass, just your own reflection, quivering slightly as you lean closer, dabbing pigment onto your cheeks with a bit of twisted cloth. The morning air is thick, quiet, full of purpose. This is not play. This is face paint. And it matters. You just wish you were more confident about what exactly you're painting on. Your cousin handed you the pigments an hour ago, ashes from burned coconut shell, crushed hibiscus petals, and the rich red of noni bark boiled down to a sticky paste. For the cheeks, she said, lines or dots, depends on what you're trying to say. She didn't elaborate. You didn't ask. And now you're about to walk into a semi-formal clan, greeting with symbols on your face you don't fully understand. You start slow. A short vertical line beneath each eye, harmless, sharp. Then 2 dots on the cheekbones, decorative, you think. But as soon as you step outside, someone raises an eyebrow. Another glances at your face and politely coughs. A third approaches. You might want to wipe the dots. That's usually a courting signal. You freeze. Mainstream historians love to catalog face paint. They classify the pigments, the binders, the patterns. They draw diagrams. Circles mean mourning lines, mean strength. Red is for vitality. Black is for solemnity. White for sacred clarity. But they rarely warn you that the difference between blessing the harvest and inviting flirtation might be 1 extra dot on the wrong side of your face. You return to the water bowl, hastily swipe off the dots, and smear a bit of charcoal ash instead. Classic, subtle, serious. You nod. Your reflection nods back, grim but appropriate. You head toward the gathering. The air smells of roasted taro flower oil and cooked breadfruit. People gather under the mainsail, seated in neat rows, backs, straight arms folded. You settle in with them, hands on knees, posture alert. Someone glances at your face and nods respectfully. Success. Then your uncle approaches. He leans down, peers at you, and mutters, "You know you've got ash on your lips." Right. You touch your mouth. The charcoal must have transferred while you were adjusting your cheek markings. Now your face says, "Prepared for battle," and accidentally kissed the fireplace. Fringe scholars have a field day with stories like this. Some even suggest that minor mistakes in facial marking were used to test a person's readiness. If you could carry your error with poise, you passed. Others say that those markings served as conversation starters in disguise. You're not sure. But judging from the way the elders keep glancing at your smudged lips and choosing not to say anything, you suspect they're enjoying the performance. You stay seated. You breathe through it. As the speeches begin, the heat rises. The pigment begins to sweat. The line under your right eye drips just slightly sliding down your cheek, like a teardrop with excellent timing. You try not to touch it. You imagine it tracing a path down your jaw, falling onto your lap. You think maybe this is symbolic of something. Historians still argue over the durability of ceremonial face paints. Some claim the binders were made to withstand hours of heat and motion, using tree sap egg whites or rendered coconut. Others suggest the very act of reapplying pigment throughout the day was the ritual. You now understand the latter. By midday, you excuse yourself, return to the water bowl, and rinse your face. The charcoal streaks melt into your fingers. The red dye leaves a faint ghost across your cheeks. You look less painted now, more weathered. The way a canoe looks better after a few journeys than it did fresh from carving. You return to the fail, sit again, barefaced. Someone passes and nods. Looks good, they say. And this time, you believe them. Tomorrow you might try again. New patterns, better research. But today, you wore your story, even if it's smudged. The feather cape isn't heavy, not at first. You lift it from its reed-lined basket with care, noting how the light glances off the rows of iridescent blue and gold, how the tiny shafts flex and shimmer, like a bird mid-breath. It smells faintly of salt, of smoke, of old dye. You drape it over your shoulders. It settles like a hush, regal, commanding, absolutely unprepared for the weather. This cape Ofumanu was passed down from your uncle, who wore it during choral recitations and once during a wedding where it nearly slid off into a ceremonial stew. It is made from hundreds of feathers, each painstakingly plucked, cleaned, arranged and tied to a woven base of hibiscus bark and pandanus. The effect is stunning, the function questionable. Mainstream historians call these cloaks marvels of craftsmanship. They describe how entire communities participated in their construction. Children gathering feathers, elders directing color arrangements, artists binding patterns into myth and memory. But they rarely talk about what it's like to actually wear one, to feel the sudden realization that you are now a walking bird sanctuary, in a climate that shifts moods like a gossiping ant. The clouds are already gathering when you arrive at the council green. At first it's just a breeze. The cape flutters. It looks dramatic, even elegant feathers lifting and falling in slow arcs like a choir rising in unison. You smile. You feel seen. Then the wind picks up, and the cape changes. What was once regal becomes rebellious. Feathers slap your face. One curls up and pokes your ear. The hem lifts, then twists, and suddenly you're a flag flapping furiously against your own shoulders. You try to hold it down. Your fingers catch only tufts. You shuffle sideways toward the guest mat and sit. The cape settles awkwardly over your lap like a sullen turkey. Fringe scholars have suggested these capes were as much for drama as dignity. One even described them as woven intimidation, meant to enlarge the wearer's silhouette, distract rivals, impress potential allies. You now believe they were also excellent tests of composure under avian assault. And then comes the rain. Not a downpour. No, just the kind of steady, determined drizzle that flattens hair and opinions. You feel it first as a tickle on the neck, then a tap on the shoulders, then a full embrace. The cape absorbs none of it. These feathers were not waterproof. They were decorative, dried, delicate. Within minutes, your glorious cloak has become a soggy mop clinging to your frame. It sticks to your arms. It smells now of damp poultry. A feather detaches and drifts dramatically into your neighbor's bowl of taro soup. You pretend not to notice. Historians still argue whether these garments were worn year-round or only seasonally. Some say there were distinct summer and wet season versions. Others claim the wearer was expected to withstand the elements as a show of resilience. You're leaning toward the second theory, as your cloak begins to develop a gentle slouch. You endure the rest of the ceremony. You do not speak. You do not move. You sit like a sad phoenix on vacation. When it ends, you rise carefully, avoiding sudden movements that might cause your cape to molt further. At home, you remove it. Slowly, tenderly. You lay it flat on a wooden rack, smoothing the edges. Some of the feathers are bent now. One has turned a strange shade of green. You fan them gently with a palm leaf. You whisper an apology. Tomorrow you'll air it out in the sun. Gently brush it. Maybe fluff the neckline. Or maybe you'll wear something simpler, something less dramatic, but probably not. Because for a moment, before the wind and the rain and the soup, you were a bird. You wore the storm. It seemed like such a good idea. You had a beard. You had beads. Why not combine them? The logic was flawless. Your cousin had done it for the solstice gathering and looked positively mythical, chin glinting like a ceremonial wind chime. So you gather your materials, tiny shells, polished wood slivers, even a few glass beads someone's uncle brought back from a European shipwreck trade. You sit cross-legged, full of ambition and twine, and begin threading your facial hair like it's a loom. 5 minutes in, you're already in too deep. Your beard is not as cooperative as your cousin's. It tangles, it knots, it resists. The strands pull unevenly. One bead slips and hits your nose. Another refuses to stay upright. You tie, untie, retie, trying to make it look intentional. After a while, it doesn't look like a statement anymore. It looks like your beard got bored and tried jewelry making in its sleep. But finally, after much muttering and one needle poked to the chin, you stand. The beard jangles. You turn your head. It clinks. You breathe out. It sways. Success. You feel majestic for the first 2 minutes. Mainstream historians have marveled at these facial bead arrangements, often associated with elevated status, storytelling, or specific ritual roles. The beads weren't just adornments, they were narrative devices. A red bead for a battle survived, a shell for a trade voyage, a carved tooth for a family line. But none of the records mention what happens when you try to drink soup with a wind chime on your jaw. You arrive at the gathering a modest meal to celebrate a coming-of-age ceremony. People are seated on woven mats. Food is arranged on banana leaves. Your entrance is noticed immediately. Your uncle nods in approval. Sounds like you brought your own chorus. You grin. The beard clinks. It's charming. Until the food is served. You lean in toward your coconut bowl, warm broth, soft taro, floating herbs, and your beard dips just slightly too low. A bead brushes the surface, a small splash. A few people glance over. You laugh softly. You adjust. You try again. This time, you lean further back, spoon halfway to your mouth. As you open wide, 3 beads swing forward and knock against your lips like tiny scolding fingers. You close your mouth. The spoon tilts. Soup dribbles. 1 drop lands directly on the carved tooth. You contemplate your life. Fringe scholars once described beaded beards as living scrolls, vessels for memory and social signaling. You now understand they were also traps. Every time you chew, something tugs. Every time you sip, something swings. You end up eating with your head tilted sideways, looking like you're trying to drink from a stream while dodging a spider web. Someone hands you a piece of roasted breadfruit. You tear it. You chew. A bead swings upward, hits your nose, and stays there. Stuck. You remove it. Your beard is now rearranging itself like it's organizing a coup. You excuse yourself. Go to the water basin. Wash the food from your face. The beads are sticky. One smells faintly of tamarind. You consider just cutting the whole thing off. But no. You made a commitment. You adjust. Retie. Swear softly. You return to the mat. Sit. Say nothing. Historians still debate whether these beaded beards were ever worn by people who had to do actual work, cook, row, harvest. Some argue they were only for orators and chiefs. Others say they were seasonal. You begin drafting your own theory. They were worn only by people who didn't mind looking majestic and mildly inconvenienced. Back home, you untie the beads one by one. Your beard sighs with relief. Your face feels suddenly light, vulnerable, breeze-kissed. You lay the beads out on cloth wipe each one and store them in a small wooden bowl that smells like cedar and mistakes. Tomorrow you'll wear the beard plain, maybe just oiled, no ornaments. Or maybe you'll try the jawline braid with the fishbone pin. Something simpler, something that doesn't attack your dinner. Humidity is a tricky enemy. It doesn't shout, it doesn't arrive with warning, it seeps, it waits. It presses gently against the back of your neck until every inch of cloth you're wearing begins to sag, to wilt, to give up. And today you are wearing a ceremonial cloak, a layered one, made from woven bark cloth and stitched plant fibers and delicate painstaking embroidery. You looked regal when you left the house. You now look like a crumpled banana leaf that's seen some things. This cloak was your aunt's an heirloom of sorts, passed down for rituals involving land blessings, reconciliation ceremonies, or honoring the rising of a new canoe. It has a smell, this cloak, sun-dried tapa, coconut smoke, old hibiscus. It rustles faintly when you move, or at least it did before the air turned to soup. Mainstream historians love these garments. They wax poetic about the craftsmanship, the dyeing processes, the layering of meaning in each fold. They note that some ceremonial cloaks were reserved for people of chiefly rank, others for specific occasions. But they rarely mention what happens when the air hits 90% humidity and the cloak decides to begin melting around your legs like a slow, culturally significant avalanche. You're standing near the front of the gathering today. It's a midday speech from one of the chiefs, and you've been given a place of honor to observe, to stand tall, to be seen. You do your best. You shift your shoulders, realign the seams. But the cloak has gained weight. What was once a dignified drape is now clinging to your arms, pulling downward, wrapping around your calves like a vine. You can feel the edges dampen and curl. Fringe scholars have pointed out that such garments were sometimes kept indoors before major events to avoid precisely this issue. You now believe that advice was born from generations of watching respected elders try not to collapse under 5 pounds of damp fabric during a full moon ceremony. The speech continues. You nod along. You feel sweat trickle down your back. The cloak does not breathe, it smothers. You try to adjust without breaking posture. A corner slides from your shoulder. You catch it. Another flap lifts and then flops forward, obscuring your elbow. You are now a soft, rustling mystery to all who glance your way. Then the wind comes. You'd think this would help. It doesn't. The breeze lifts the damp edge of the cloak and throws it directly into your face like an affectionate sea creature. You inhale sharply, catching a lungful of fermented bark scent. You hold still. You blink. The cloak slowly lowers itself again, ashamed but not sorry. Historians still argue whether these cloaks were intended to be worn fully wrapped or just draped over one shoulder. Some oral histories suggest variation. By region, coastal communities wore lighter versions, inland communities favored heavier, more imposing types. You now know that what matters most is not the weight or style, but how long you can survive under it without making a scene. The speech ends. Applause is gentle, respectful. You clap softly, cloak sagging like a curtain caught in the rain. When it's time to stand and move with the rest of the group, you rise cautiously. The cloak rises with you reluctantly, damply. It doesn't sweep anymore. It sloshes. You make it back home like a migrating turtle, slow and heavy. Inside, you peel the cloak away layer by layer. Your arms are streaked with red dye. Your shoulders feel bruised. You lay the garment out on a raised rack, praying for a wind strong enough to dry it, but not so strong. It gets blown into the neighbor's breadfruit tree. You sit in a clean tunic, drink cool water, fan your arms with a palm leaf. Outside, the cloak sulks in the sun. Tomorrow, if you must wear it again, you'll layer light under heavy. Maybe pack a second secret cloak. Or maybe be the person at the ceremony handing out flowers instead. Because power is great, but breathable fabric, now that's sacred. You hear them before you see them. The soft jingling, the faint ting-ting-ting of tiny beads, stitched into ankle cuffs, moving in time with bare feet across the wooden platform. It's a sound you've always loved until today. Because today, those bells are yours. They're beautiful, really delicate cuffs, made from plaited fiber bands, adorned with tiny bead shells, and the occasional smooth bit of coral. They're woven to fit snugly around your ankles, meant to enhance your movements, to catch the rhythm of your steps, to add a whisper of ceremony to even the smallest motion. But they do not come with a volume control. You fasten them carefully, looping the ties around your lower legs with practiced fingers. The beads shift. A few chime lightly. It feels like you're wrapping your ankles in polite applause. You stand. They jingle. You take one step. They celebrate. You exhale. They agree. Mainstream historians call these ankle adornments auditory ornaments, a term that makes them sound like instruments, which they are. Worn primarily during dance procession or ritual storytelling, they serve to punctuate movement, to emphasize the rhythm of the body, to announce presence without words. What the historians don't tell you is that once these cuffs are on stealth, is no longer an option. You're not dancing today, not officially. You're attending a gathering where movement is minimal, reverence is expected, and silence is considered polite. But for reasons that remain unclear, your aunt insists the bells are part of your outfit. To honor the ancestors, she says, to keep your step true. You suspect she just wants to keep track of you. You walk to the meeting house. The cuffs announce every step like a tiny parade. Ting, 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 ting. You pass a sleeping dog. It opens one eye. You pass your uncle. He nods and smirks. You consider tiptoeing, but the beads just whisper louder. Fringe scholars sometimes claim that these ankle bells were originally used to mark transitions. Child to adult, student to teacher, unmarried to promised. You now suspect they were also useful for letting everyone know who just dropped a cup, tripped on a mat, or tried to sneak a second piece of taro cake. You arrive late and everyone turns to look not at your face, but your feet. You smile sheepishly. Sit quickly. The cuffs jingle against the mat. A few people stifle grins. You cross your legs carefully. The shells clack. You try to stay perfectly still. The speaker begins. The air is still. You feel a breeze tickle your toes, and then without meaning to, you shift your ankle just slightly. Ting. The sound is small. The moment is huge. Heads turn. You pretend it was someone else. The beads betray you again. Historians still argue whether these cuffs were worn daily or reserved for key rites. Some say they were only for performers. Others suggest they were tools of initiation. You now believe they were also excellent deterrents against sneaking off during chores. The ceremony ends. You rise. The bells respond immediately. You walk home slowly, trying to step in a rhythm that sounds intentional. It's no use. You're a melody with legs, a tambourine with opinions, a walking lullaby that got distracted. Back at home, you unfasten the cuffs. Your ankles are lightly marked from the pressure. You stretch your feet. Silence returns. It's eerie. You almost miss the sound. Almost. You hang the cuffs on a peg near the door. They clink softly as they settle. You sit. You smile. Tomorrow you'll wear them again. Maybe for dance. Maybe for fun. Maybe just to remind everyone that you exist loudly. But for tonight, your ankles are quiet, and you are thankful. It starts off subtle, just a light swish at your side. A flicker of movement you catch in your peripheral vision. You stop walking. It stops too. You turn your head. Nothing. You walk again, and there it is, fluttering like a fabric ghost. At hip level, your waist fan. Yes, today, you've tied on a tifa, a decorative fan meant to hang from your belt, flutter in the breeze, and gently remind everyone around you that you are both stylish and vaguely ceremonial. Made of split pandanus or braided coconut leaves, it's designed less for function and more for flair. Aesthetic utility, if you will. Except today, there's wind, and your fan has opinions. At first it behaves. It sways with each step, its fibers catching sunlight and admiration. You catch sight of your reflection in a polished wooden panel and nod. It looks good, like you've stepped out of a legend, or at least a village play about one. Then the breeze shifts. The fan lifts, twists, slaps your thigh, hard. Mainstream historians love the tifa as a symbol of refinement. They note that waist fans were used during processions, dances, even storytelling sessions, worn by those who had already proven themselves worthy of walking through life with mild wind-powered drama. Some versions were stiff, meant to signify poise. Others, like yours, were designed to move. You are now learning exactly how much. You try adjusting it, twist the string tuck a corner under your sash. The fan untucks itself and flutters immediately, catching the breeze like it's auditioning for an aerial dance competition. You sigh. You step forward. The fan swings out and catches the back of your knee, startling you into a half-skip that several villagers absolutely notice. Fringe scholars have posited that fans like these had communicative intent. A subtle flick could mean impatience. A sideways swing could signal flirtation. A fan that repeatedly smacks you while you're trying to carry firewood might be saying, rethink your accessories. You press onward. Today's event is a midday welcome for visiting canoe builders from a neighboring village. You are not center stage, but you are on display. You sit on the outer edge of the gathering legs, folded fan carefully arranged across your lap. And then the wind returns. It doesn't so much gust as strut in an uninvited participant that lifts the edge of the fan and flips it upward directly into your face. You bat it down discreetly. It flutters again this time, catching your neighbor in the side. She nods, suppressing a smile. The priest stands to speak. Everyone quiets. You try to hold the fan still with one hand, but this only makes the motion more theatrical. It wiggles, it wobbles, it escapes. The string tangles slightly in your sash, causing the fan to spin like a ceremonial compass, having a breakdown. You make it through the ceremony without causing a scene. But by the time it ends, your right hip is sore. Your fingers are cramping, and the fan seems deeply satisfied with its performance. You untie it as soon as you're able and tuck it under your arm like a naughty child. Historians still debate whether waist fans were more about social signaling or temperature control. You now firmly believe they were designed by someone who hated stillness. There is no way to wear one passively. It flirts, it bites, it beckons the wind like an open invitation. Back at home, you hang it near the window where the breeze can flirt with it freely away from your knees and dignity. It flutters happily, slapping the wall in soft, rhythmic defiance. Tomorrow you'll skip the Tifa, or maybe not. Maybe next time you'll let it misbehave on purpose because part of you secretly enjoyed the chaos. Even if your thigh still stings. At first the pigment looks harmless. It's a deep ochre mixed with charcoal ash, and the oily juice of noni fruit crushed in a shallow stone bowl and stirred with a strip of coconut bark. You've seen it used before on faces, shoulders, sometimes full arms. It smells like wet earth and crushed promises. Today you'll wear it across your chest, down your arms, and over your back. You dip your fingers into the cool paste. The application starts smoothly. You paint a long line across your shoulder blade, 2 quick slashes across the biceps, a dotted spiral at the wrist, each design chosen by your aunt, to reflect honor balance and slightly improved posture. You don't argue. The paint glides across your skin in cool, even strokes. It dries quickly, leaving a matte finish that feels light and ceremonial. You look good. For now, mainstream historians speak with admiration about these body pigments, how they were made from local materials, how their meanings shifted between villages, how warriors wore them before battle, and dancers used them to command attention. But what they leave out is the aftermath. Because once these paints set, they stay. They do not rinse off. They do not fade gently. They cling to your skin like emotional baggage. You step into the sun. The pigment tightens, not painfully, just enough to remind you that your body is now wearing a language. The spiral on your wrist begins to itch slightly. You resist the urge to scratch it. You lift your arm to wave at someone across the green, and the line across your back pulls just a little. The paint isn't cracking, it's asserting. Today's event is a youth ritual, an afternoon of recitation, drumming, and storytelling. You've been asked to lead the opening chant. You walk to the center mat movements, slow and deliberate, letting your paint speak as much as your voice. You kneel. You feel the pigment resist. You chant. You're halfway through the second verse when a fly lands on your arm. You twitch. The spiral smudges. A small child giggles nearby. You continue chanting. The fly returns. You inhale through your nose like a professional. Fringe scholars suggest these pigments were intentionally designed to endure days of wear, evolving from decoration into identity. Some note that certain mixes were permanent, with ingredients that stained the skin for weeks. You wonder briefly whether you've used one of those. Your aunt was vague this morning. She said it'll stay with you for a while. She didn't define a while. The chant ends. You rise. Your back itches. You bow to the elders. You catch sight of your reflection in a brass bowl. One shoulder design has melted slightly in the heat and now looks like a very determined crab. You accept it. Back home, you attempt removal. Warm water, coconut soap, a woven scrubber. You rub gently, nothing. You rub harder, a faint smear. You now have a reddish-gray cloud where a line used to be. You look like you've wrestled an overripe yam. You try lime juice, it burns. You stop. You sit in the shade freshly washed, but still vividly illustrated. A cousin passes by, sees the remnants of your pigment, and nods approvingly. "Looks strong," he says. Like you survived something. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. That's the point, right? Historians still debate whether body paint was ever meant to be perfect. Maybe the smudges were part of it. Maybe the faded spots were storytelling. Maybe the permanence wasn't a mistake, but the message itself: you did this, you wore this, now you carry it. You stretch your arms. The paint cracks softly. You feel it move with you. Tomorrow the lines will be softer, the colors less sharp. But for now your skin still holds the story. You close your eyes. You let it stain. You were warned, not directly. No one ever says it, but the way your older cousin looked at you as she handed you the shoulder pads said enough. They're made from bird feathers, not just a few. Dozens, maybe hundreds, bound into tight upward curving pads that sit high on your shoulders like wings that decided halfway through, growing that they'd rather just watch from a safe distance. You slip them on carefully. The base is woven laufala, firm but flexible, fitted with two ties that crisscross under your arms. They sit well at first light, airy, a little itchy. The feathers bristle with movement, catching the light and every stray breeze. You look in the mirror. You look like you're about to deliver an important monologue, or maybe lead an elite team of bird lawyers into a very specific courtroom. Mainstream historians often note the symbolic function of these feathered shoulder pads: power, status, vigilance, readiness. They point to patterns that mimic wings, that echo sacred birds of prey, that show one's role in watching over others. But none of them, not one, mentions what happens when someone sneezes directly behind you. You arrive at the gathering just in time. It's a storytelling circle today, with youth seated in front and elders sharing tales behind a thin haze of smoldering coconut husk. You take your place near the center. The feathers rise and fall with your breath. Someone offers you a drink. You nod politely. The feathers shudder. They seem excited. Then comes the sneeze. Not a big one, just a sudden sharp gust from someone behind you. You feel the air hit, and your shoulders explode. Feathers rise like startled geese. A few lift, completely twisting upward, fluttering in all directions. You try to hold still, but it's too late. Your shoulder pads are now in full defense mode, arched, flared, looking like you just received shocking news from the wind. Fringe scholars occasionally speculate that such garments served as attention grabbers in oral tradition. If a storyteller's words didn't land, perhaps their outfit could fill in. You now suspect this is true. Everyone is definitely paying attention, just not to the story. You smooth the feathers down. They resist. One sticks up like a question mark. You fold your arms. The pads rise again. You are, it seems, wearing wearable emotion. The storyteller continues. You listen, breathing slowly, shoulders calm. But a shift in position, someone behind you, leaning too close, a child whispering at your side, sets them off again. The feathers tremble, then twitch. You are now less audience member, more living weather vane. Historians still argue over whether feather shoulder pads were strictly ceremonial or used in higher status casual wear. Some think they were only for warriors or messengers. Others say they were for anyone brave enough to carry a bird's memory on their back. You're beginning to understand. It's not about comfort. It's about presence, about silhouette, about reminding people that yes, you are in the room, and no, you cannot sneak out quietly. After the storytelling ends, you rise carefully. The pads rise with you, slow and dramatic. A few feathers fall behind, drifting like forgotten opinions. Someone claps, you nod, and your shoulder twitches, flap, more clapping. Back home, you remove the pads gently. They are still full of air and movement, even off your body. You lay them flat and smooth each feather with your palm. They relax, slightly. Tomorrow you'll decide whether to wear them again. But for tonight you sit quietly, remembering the story, your shoulder blades still tingling with attention. They say every shell tells a story. You just didn't realize yours would be misinterpreted so quickly. You're sitting cross-legged, looping strand after strand of polished shells onto a fiber cord, threading them carefully, by size, by color, by the vague guidance of a memory your uncle once shared after 2 cups of fermented breadfruit juice. If you wear the wrong pattern, he said, you might accidentally declare yourself chief of something. Or worse, already married. You laughed at the time. But now, tying off the last knot and lifting the necklace to your chest, you begin to understand. The shells are beautiful, white, gold-flecked, iridescent. They clack softly as you move. And then they clang. You glance down. You've tied them too long. The necklace hits just below your sternum and swings like a ceremonial pendulum every time you turn your head. Mainstream historians admire these adornments for their symbolism. Shells were currency, memory, status. Necklaces were worn to reflect achievements, grief alliances, and affection. Some combinations were passed down. Others were crafted fresh for singular moments. What the historians often omit, however, is that these necklaces were heavy-loud and dangerously easy to misread. You arrive at the mid-village gathering space where a new canoe is being unveiled. There's chanting, clapping, dancing. You nod at friends, settle onto the mat. Someone across the circle stares at your chest, leans over and whispers. Their neighbor glances too. Then they both bow slightly. You freeze. You've said something without saying it. And whatever you've said, they think it's important. Fringe scholars occasionally write about the interpretive ambiguity of shell arrangements. A single strand might mean you've completed your service to the clan. A triple knot at the base could mean mourning. Certain shell shapes, spirals, fans, teeth carry layered meanings depending on region. You now realize your necklace has at least 3 patterns and 2 conflicting metaphors. You might have just declared war on the Tarot Guild, or worse, offered marriage to the canoe. You can't take it off. That would be rude. Instead, you adjust your posture, sit straighter, try to look like whatever leader your necklace says you are. Someone offers you a seat closer to the elders. You accept. You sit. The shells clack. You breathe carefully. Then someone tries to hand you the speaking staff. You wave it off with a smile, palms out. The elder looks confused, then amused. They nod. Maybe they understand. Maybe they don't. The ceremony ends. You stand. The necklace swings and hits your sternum with a muted thunk. Someone applauds. You're not sure if it's for the canoe or for you. Back home, you remove the necklace. Your skin bears faint indentations where the heavier shells pressed into your collarbone. You lay the strand on the mat and stare at it. The shells glisten innocently, like they didn't just ruin your afternoon with miscommunication and overconfidence. Tomorrow you'll untie a few strands. Maybe replace the center shell with something less declarative. A smooth pebble, perhaps. Or just a tighter cord. Because sometimes the loudest things you say aren't words. They're shells, clinking in the wrong rhythm. You should have stopped at 8, maybe 9. But something pride impulse, a cousin's dare, convinced you to go full 11. 11 bangles, on one arm, all at once, woven ones, carved ones, beaded ones, stacked high from wrist to elbow, gleaming in the late morning sun like a portable festival trying to stay relevant. They look incredible, you'll admit that. Each bangle is a miniature artwork, carved shell, with geometric ridges, dyed coconut wood with soft swirls of burnt orange braided palm fiber, tight as a drumhead, individually elegant, worn all together. You're now the most decorated percussion instrument in the village. Every motion sings. Every blink of your elbow has an entourage. Mainstream historians describe these bangles with reverence, evidence of social rank indicators of wealth clan markers, artistic legacy. They've been found in burial sites named in chance and traded between islands like sweetbread at a feast. What's not in the footnotes is the sheer noise of it all. You walk through the gathering path and jingle, jangle, jingle, a soft rustle of leaves. Know it's your forearm turning slightly. A wave to your aunt. Clink, clack, clap. You stop moving. The bracelets don't. They settle on a delay like your arm's trying to catch up with its own drama. You reach the communal fail. The elders are seated sharing boiled taro and hushed conversation. You approach with care, arms tucked in close. A bangle catches the light. Someone squints. You kneel. The bangles slide slightly and strike each other. One rolls upward into the crook of your elbow. Another bunches at your wrist. You try to keep your hands still. The noise keeps going. Fringe scholars speculate that this exact issue may have once been intentional, a subtle status cue. Someone important enough to be noisy without reprimand. Someone decorated enough that movement didn't need stealth. Someone whose presence needed no announcement. Their wrists had already done the talking. But right now, your wrists won't shut up. The storytelling begins. You're silent. Your jewelry is not. You reach for a cup, clink. Adjust your seating, clack. Cross your arms, scurring. You are a symphony of interruptions. The storyteller pauses briefly and gives you a gentle look. You mouth, sorry. The bangles say you're welcome. Historians still argue whether these bracelets were ritual wear only or daily expression. Some oral traditions suggest they were tokens of friendship, given one by one, until a full stack signified a life well connected. Others say they were merely the mark of someone with access to multiple materials. Either way, you are now fully accessorized and emotionally overwhelmed. The story ends. You rise. The bangles cascade down your forearm with the sound of a gentle landslide. You try to hold them in place. They defy you. Back home, you begin the process of removal. Each bangle slides off reluctantly. Your skin underneath is ridged like a topographic map. You rub your forearm, and it sighs in silence for the first time all day. You place the bangles in a neat circle on the mat. They shine. They wait. You stare at them, tempted to stack just 2, maybe 3, but not 11. Never again 11. Because silence is also ceremonial, and your wrist just earned it. You didn't mean to end up in the drum circle. You just wanted to watch, listen to the rhythm, maybe sway a little, feel the evening wind slip through the palms, while someone else handled the coordination. But here you are, seated cross-legged with a small pate in front of you, a carved wooden slit drum, and 2 sticks that feel suspiciously ceremonial. And what's worse, you're still wearing your bangles. All of them, again. They clack softly as you shift, catching the dim firelight in rhythmic flashes. You hadn't planned on wearing them today, but they matched your sash, and the sash matched your mood, and now you're an echo chamber in human form. The lead drummer nods. The rhythm begins, soft, pulsing, deliberate. You follow, tapping cautiously. Your bangles follow you, creating an unintended offbeat, a kind of counterpoint percussion, with no musical training. Someone to your left smirks. Someone to your right tries to sync with your bangle beat. It doesn't work. You try to mute your forearm by holding it tighter. The bangles jingle with defiance. Mainstream historians have documented Samoa's deep relationship with rhythm, how instruments and dance were interwoven, how drums served both artistic and communicative purposes, from village celebrations to warnings across the coast. What they don't detail is the quiet panic of accidentally becoming a soloist when you meant to be background ambience. The rhythm speeds up. Your hands follow instinctively, muscle memory kicking in from ceremonies past. But your wrists betray you. The bangles jangle louder, refusing to sit still. Every movement sends a tremor of sound through the night air. A baby starts to cry. You stop drumming for half a beat. The crying stops. You resume. So does the wail. You pause again. Your wrists are now co-parenting the room's mood. Fringe scholars have theorized that excess adornment was once used to amplify a participant's presence, not just visually, but sonically. The sound of movement meant you were there, that your actions weren't just seen, but felt. You suppose that's still true. Right now, your presence is very known. You shift to try and tuck your arms closer to your torso. The bangles squeeze up to your elbows and settle like smug bracelets of consequence. You drum softly now, elbows pinned shoulders. Tight, expression neutral. Someone behind you whispers nice bracelets. You say nothing. Your wrists chime a soft reply. The song ends. There's polite applause. You stand hands folded to muffle the sound. The bangles respond with a farewell rustle. You bow slightly. The lead drummer raises an eyebrow, not disapproving, just impressed you got through it. You walk home slowly, arms hugged close. You consider removing the bangles right there on the path. But no. You deserve to hear their final clink on your own terms. Back at your mat you sit, slide the bangles off one by one, set them down gently. They lie still now, quiet and glinting. You rotate your wrists. They feel lighter, empty. Tomorrow maybe you'll go with just 2, maybe just 1, or none. Because sometimes fashion should listen too. You're standing before the mirror, the water bowl again, adjusting your final piece of the evening. It's a humble garment. No feathers, no shells, no jingling. Just a plain sash, tied with a practiced knot around your waist. You feel calm, you feel balanced, and you feel something you haven't felt in days, relief. Because tonight, you're not dressing to impress. You're not layering history on your shoulders or threading metaphors into your hair. Tonight, you're wearing only what you need. No noise, no commentary, no accidental marriage proposals sewn into your accessories. Just quiet. But even in this simplicity, there's meaning. The fiber that makes up your wrap was harvested. Last season softened over months, dyed with crushed berries that stained your aunt's hands for days. The tie you used came from a weaving leftover narrow, discreet, made with just enough care to hold firm without flair. You're not unadorned, you're unburdened. Mainstream historians often focus on the grand, the unusual, the ceremonial splendor. They catalog the cloaks, the fans, the face paints with precision. But they rarely speak to the daily dignity, the quiet styles that meant presence without volume. Not every outfit shouted, some whispered. And sometimes that whisper was the loudest thing in the room. Tonight the community gathers not for spectacle, but for something smaller. A remembrance, a quiet meal, a circle of song not performed but shared. You sit with them cross-legged on a mat, still warm from the day's sun. The person next to you wears no jewelry. The elder across from you wears only a faded band of tapa around one wrist. Everyone smells of salt and smoke and stories. You don't speak. You don't need to. Fringe scholars have written tentatively. That fashion in Samoa wasn't always about display. It was about survival, about coherence. Clothing wasn't simply a statement, but a rhythm. You wore what allowed you to carry on, what kept you from burning under the sun, what helped you slip through the wind, what marked a moment without interrupting it. A child begins a song. You hum along. A hand is passed around the circle holding roasted banana. You take it. Your fingers are bare, but they remember every weight they've carried this week. Every bead, every knot, every stiff, rustling leaf that insisted on being worn. You smile. You made it. You wore every strange, awkward, meaningful thing history asked of you. And you're still here. Let the wind fade now. Let the feathers, the beads, the bangles all rest. You're not wearing them anymore. Not the bark cloth that clung to your knees. Not the fish-slicked oil in your hair. Not the cheek paint that smudged when you smiled. All of it laid down, set aside. You've returned to your mat arms, unbound ankles, free hair, loose and soft from the breeze that finally arrived too late to ruffle your dignity. Breathe in slowly. Let the echo of those garments drift through you, the hush of the leaflets, the crackle of the skirt, the steady beat of your ankle bells, long since quieted. They don't need to speak anymore. You did that. You wore the stories. You endured the weight. You laughed even when your beard dunked itself into soup. You adjusted the fan. You kept walking. Now let yourself be still. You're wearing only the night now, nothing woven, nothing pressed, nothing pinned. Just your breath. Just the softness of a woven mat beneath your shoulders and the hush of village voices carried on wind so light it barely stirs your lashes. Your body remembers the costume of history, but your spirit knows when it's time to let it go. Rest now. Let the shells stop clinking. Let the waistband loosen. Let the paint fade from your skin. You wore it all, and now you sleep.